McKellar.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd firstly like to commend all types of responders to emergencies that happen nationwide, be it firefighters during a bushfire or volunteer SES workers during a storm. We have always had a community that has stood behind one another in times of need, many risking their own lives to protect others and their property. And with the rising rate of natural disasters and emergencies that occur, we will need to stand together stronger and defend each other better. Even recently, we have had incredible examples of selflessness of members of our community in dangerous situations, such as in the recent bushfires across the Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and parts of northern New South Wales. This Emergency Response Fund Bill has been formed to show the appreciation and acknowledgement that the government has for these services that play a vital role in our community, not to mention the fact that a large portion of them are volunteer members of the community. Through the creation of this fund, Australia's government will always have resources available to help those in crisis situations within our global community. Putting aside $4 billion as an initial investment, which will be managed by the Future Fund Board of Guardians, we can expect a large return on this long-term commitment by the government in assisting communities ravaged by disasters, as well as investments into the prevention of such issues. It was reviewed that at the previous state, the emergency services and subsequent programs were not at a standard that could meet the scale of possible catastrophic events in the future. Thus, a large part of this fund would be put forward to the improvement of such resources until they reach the criteria for what the community needs and deserves. The Australian people deserve to have emergency services that can act quickly and save lives without waiting for any bureaucracy to send them forward. They deserve to have fire services that can jump into action at the first sight of an emergency. With this bill, we will have more funding to put towards things that our community needs and deserves in times of emergencies. In my own electorate of McKellar, I have 10 rural fire service brigades, marine rescue stations and many other emergency service volunteer groups who do excellent work keeping the great people of the northern beaches of Sydney safe. I will also use this opportunity to acknowledge the Northern Beaches firefighters who have deployed to Queensland and northern New South Wales to assist in combating the out-of-control fires in those areas. I am informed by RFS brigades that multiple volunteers from the beaches, but also all over the state and country, are heading north to assist. Mr Deputy Speaker, though through the use of grants and investments into prevention methods, such as new and improved infrastructure that can withstand future natural disasters of all categories, and the adoption of innovative technology, we will be able to protect and help Australians that have been or will be affected by these disasters. Not only that, but of the grants, they can be used in the recovery efforts for producers and small business owners to educate them and give advice on the risk of any future land ventures, on the recovery and re-establishment of their livelihoods, and the investment into tools for better knowledge and understanding of local climate viability. At this point, the fund will move to a maximum of $150 million a year to fund natural disaster recovery efforts and all types of emergency responses. This allotment of resources is already above and beyond what was previously set out to cover the original cost of the recovery programs, but now they can use a large portion of the future fund to plan for the future. This will be put back into investments and therefore yield a large long-term growth. This in turn will help our communities to protect themselves and each other against the natural disasters that are only becoming ever more frequent. Due to the ever-changing circumstances of natural disasters and the climate, this fund will come under review within 10 years of establishment. This will allow the responsible minister to inform both houses of Parliament to see a public review of the bill. It will be important that we refresh and modernise the bill for the safety and benefit of the Australian community. This measure speaks to the Coalition Government's commitment to being adaptive to changing landscapes. One might question whether or not it is time to invest in larger, high-risk operations, but the Future Fund Board will be responsible for the investments of this fund. With the government having worked with the board for over a decade, we will see them managing 6 other funds successfully to a benchmark and even outperforming what was expected of them beforehand. This has created trust, a strong relation and a reputation that makes us feel secure to invest this fund with them. Of course, these funds will be used in a robust and transparent framework that clearly shows and details how and why the government is deciding to use these funds and when. This will also follow the use of advice from the Commonwealth's expert on natural disaster management, the Director-General of Emergency Management Australia. Being in that position, the Director-General is well suited and one might even say highly qualified for this role. They are in charge of coordination of all kinds of support toward the citizens of our community, be it physical or financial, and all financial decisions will comply with what the Commonwealth has set out in its rules and guidelines of all procedures on grants and resource gathering. The Emergency Minister will work closely with the Director-General of Emergency Management when devising new methods and ways of which to combat the destruction of natural disasters, and as such, their collaboration will bring about a good use of the new funds available to the emergency services. It is through their highly cohesive coordination that the information will be available to the public population, being as transparent as possible, and any use of the emergency fund will be published onto the Department of Home Affairs website and stated in the annual report for those officers. Yet, of course, in the case of privacy, individual names and the purpose for the payment will not be published. Not only will it be published on the Department of Home Affairs website, it will also be published on the Grant Connect website within 21 days of being claimed. The recipients of these funds can be anyone affected by natural disasters in an adverse way, be it individuals, incorporated or unincorporated bodies, not-for-profit organisations, educational institutions such as a university, state and territory governments and local government bodies. In the case of natural disasters, we're all affected and we all need to look out for each other, and thus these funds are available to an extensive range of our population. Mr Deputy Speaker, before I conclude, it would be remiss of me not to comment on the previous speaker, who spent 29.5 minutes talking about education and literally 30 seconds about assisting our emergency services in the times of a natural disaster. It is disappointing that the Labor Party treats our emergency services, or indeed that member of the Labor Party, treats our emergency services in this fashion. And I hope that other speakers from the Labor Party spend more time talking about how we can assist emergency services rather than making erroneous political points about education. This bill will provide funding to the areas in the emergency services that truly need it. It will provide funding to all emergency services and the responses they provide. I commend this bill to the House.